Hey, what is up, everyone? We are starting a little late today, but how is it going? This is Free Speech Geek Weekly. I'm with Adam. I'm with Steven. Guys, what's up?
Oh, nothing much. Glad to be doing this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
great way to start the week off, honestly, to, kind of
troubleshoot. Yes, I agree. I love it.
That sounds like a
Yeah,
Monday, if you think
yeah.
about it.
yeah.
Oh, one sec.
Oh, okay. Um, well, oh, in and out, Kyle.
Yeah, there you
But no, really, like a Monday. Like this, it's a Monday like any other.
go. It
Right?
really is. And part of the deep lore is that, for a trio of geeks, we are actually pretty technically incompetent. Like, I
Mhm.
think the three of us together maybe approximate like the computing power of a tenth of like a GPU.
Yeah. Yeah, putting those crypto miners to work with our minds, I guess. Yeah, but today we are talking The Boys, as well as a little bit of talk about the fandom of The Boys, the state of The Boys. Maybe compare it to another show that finished up last week. You guys might have heard of it, The Acolyte. I didn't finish it. I'm not gonna lie.
I-
Started
But
now.
I
Wrong
do know what
opinion.
I do know what the fans are talking about, and that's what we're here to talk about. But first off, let's talk about season finale of The Boys. General thoughts. What do you guys think?
No comic background experience from watching The Boys. What I really liked about getting into The Boys in the first place was the idea of the superhero kind of like, but real, which means going into like human emotion, how people could be,
Yeah.
And the show's been great. I think once it got to like season 3, I felt like sometimes some of the scenes would be shocking just for the sake of it. And I feel like season 4 did a better job of when it was showing something shocking, it was in service of an interesting plot point.
Mhm.
So I will say, and it's interesting, like for instance, some of the most boring scenes for me was I forgot the character's name, Frenchie and Makamo.
Oh,
What's her
Oh, the girl, yeah.
kimono?
Oh.
No. Anyway, that
yeah.
like when I felt like they were just going back and forth too much with that thing we talk about where people don't really talk about their emotions, but this was like overtime. And then they had the fight scene that was like because she was on the drugs, right? And everything looked weird. Like
Mhm.
to me, that fell flat. That was like, well, let's just try to make something interesting. But
Yeah, I mean, Frenchie kind of had this like relationship, and then he turns himself in for being a killer, and then he gets out, conveniently. Like there was a lot of weirdness going on with Frenchie's storyline this season that I think didn't get resolved in a very satisfying way. Would you say that that's a fair?
yeah, because I like what it was getting to by the end of it. Like, I think by season 4, we should just have them in a fully like loving relationship, and then it's more about things getting in the way of them rather than their personal things getting in the way. Like we've been seeing that from the beginning. Like her at the end actually saying something, I thought was amazing. I love that because I think that's a cool character. But I
This
think
is a spoiler-free show, by the way.
Oh yeah, but what worked a lot for me and what I think works with the show, especially season 4, is the huge like kind of the setting change near the end. Like leading up to that too, like you thought, okay, they have to put this in motion, and it's so hard to do it. Once they did, the whole world changed more than anyone expected, except for obviously the smartest girl in the world. She was planning for that. And then I will just end where this season did the things I like a lot, especially scenes with Homelander. Like when
Mm,
he is put
yeah.
up against something, even the audience questions as how do they answer this in this universe? And then you see him confront and then be that scary hero. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, it's interesting seeing what's his essentially Homelander's becoming the person that is, because if you read the comics, they're kind of doing something. It looks like they're heading in a direction that's going to be similar to the comics, but at the same time, there's a little few changes here and there. Newman and all of them are taken out already, so they're going to play it a little differently. But more or less, the end of the comic spoilers just ends in essentially superhero revolution, more or less, right? and it looks like we're getting that. But at the same time, we're still getting unique storylines. Kimiko and Frenchie, they were kind of a thing, but it was just never spoken type of thing in the comics. So here we see them go from not knowing each other to actually developing a relationship, which is cool. Seeing these characters fleshed out, Mother's Milk being kind of like this rock to the group is pretty awesome, considering if they stripped out a lot of his character from the comics. So making him this kind of like neurotic, kind of ADHD riddled kind of person that still like holds the group together, even though he's very flawed himself, works.
Yeah.
I really, really enjoy that his character is really grown. The stuff with him and his wife last season was kind of annoying, but
I think
works
they
this
kind
season.
of tied everything up with him and his wife with the killing of Todd, right?
Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, it's like
Wrapped it up.
basically any conflicts that he had with his wife prior, has been resolved as a result of just getting, the new man out of the way.
True. Yeah. So if you don't know, in the comics, this is fascinating. I'm gonna bring this up just because it's so unique. Vought tested on Mother's Milk's mom, and it was a nightmare. It was all just like they were just testing wild stuff, and essentially Mother's Milk got superheroes because he got it from the breast milk of his mother from when she was lactating. So that's how we got superpowers that way. All of them kind of have superpowers in the show. There's no one with superpowers type of situation. But yeah, and like seeing this and that's the crux of his character in the comics is this his family, right? And we see that a little bit here, right? With his family. He brings it up, his grandfather with Soldier Boy in season 2.
Was it season 2? I thought it was season 3.
Season 3
3 was the season of Soldier Boy.
Yes, season of Soldier Boy. But yeah, we see that he's this like flawed character that's greatly affected by this, and I think it works. You don't need the lactating super milk powers.
So interesting. He had superpowers in the comic.
Yeah,
that's really cool that they chose not to do that because I think it works better.
In the comics, V is like essentially what the temp V was last season. That's what V is in the comics, and it doesn't kill you.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's just like, let's go beat some people up, inject, and we're gonna go kick some ass now.
Okay, that is kind of cool.
Yeah,
and they were kind of doing that anyway, especially with
a little bit. Yeah. Definitely. I enjoy Huey. I love Huey's character. I think. Yeah. When I look at younger people, I go, Jack Quaid, he represents the youth. He's what I like. Anytime I think of like Gen Z or anything younger, I'm like, be like Jack Quaid, people. Be like that guy. But he got raped twice in this season. Let's talk about that.
Oh my God.
2 episodes in a row.
Yeah.
And I'm not the one that like is like all over this. Like a lot of people on Twitter are kind of complaining about it. But 2 in a row does make me go, it's a little much.
Well, and I think a lot of people were reacting to Kripke's comments about it, right? Where it was around the writers' room, we thought it was hilarious that this, he's going through these character building moments, and it's like, well, I don't know if hilarious is the term I would use, but and I don't. Let me be clear, is like I think that those scenes were great and should be in the show.
Yeah, because I don't think it directly. It's not like this guy was going through some, and I don't know how to say, like some trauma that, like for instance, one he thought it was his girlfriend, and then the other one was kind of a funny thing because he's pretending to be this person on purpose to go to where that crap happens, and it's almost like funny, like getting involved into that.
Well, and it's also his childhood hero. Like,
that was another.
I think that's sort of the kind of bitter irony of it.
Wow.
And it's unfortunate that they didn't take more time to kind of unpack some of the things that happened with Huey. He was kind of a stoic figure this season because it's like, losing his father, seeing his mother again, the sexual assaults that we've referenced. He has been through the ringer this season, and in the finale, the one person that he's kind of loved and respected this entire time just throws it all in his face, and it's like,
that is an interesting take. how he's a great character of this show.
Yeah.
Like I really love how, and yeah, he went through a lot this season, but I almost felt like he was a side character this
Yeah.
season.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Felt that way.
he definitely took a step back considering the role that he's been playing. There was also, was there? I tell me if I'm wrong. No Billy Joel this season.
I don't recall any Billy Joel actually.
Yeah, they kind of dropped that after a while, right? I feel like there was like always like a Billy Joel song to go with what Huey's doing, and then
yeah.
bam, dropped it. I know last season they really focused on Mother's Milk, so they did a lot of hip hop, but this season, music wise, a little directionless.
Yeah, I did not even think about the music. Yeah.
And, I have to say, like, I really enjoyed this season, and especially the finale. But the longer I go thinking about it, I'm like, man, it was really kind of directionless. Like, I think they saved it with the finale.
Mhm.
There was a lot of good stuff that happened, but it's like the whole thing with Sage, for instance. I'm like, you could have had the entire season without her.
Mhm.
And the way that you escape criticism of having the smartest character in the world that has this master plan is you take her off camera for 2-3 episodes and then have her reappear in the finale and say, I did it all.
Yeah, that is
Like-
interesting. But you know what? Another thing I got from this season that I love is the actor that plays A-Train is so good at being that kind of torn superhero. Like in his face, like the way he acts in his face, it looks like someone that knows what he's doing is bad, but he's at that point where he's going to be doing these bad things to the point
Right.
where he's wanting to do good and he hates, not because he doesn't like to do good, but he knows he's going to get, Homelander will just splatter him any second.
Right.
And so I think, yeah, A-Train, like anytime A-Train showed up, I thought was some of the coolest moments. And I hope he gets more time. Like I would love if this next season he just joins the boys. And maybe that's in the comics. I don't know, but I like that idea.
I assume he's gonna have a redemption arc of some sort.
Seems that way.
I don't think he's gonna live though, if I had to guess, but he will redeem himself. Yeah, he's pretty much an asshole, but he does need that redemption arc. He was also in every single episode except for the last episode, which is interesting.
Yeah, because he ran away after.
Oh yeah.
Walk.
And you know what's interesting too, like the character for Starlight, Annie, like she's supposed to be, a good guy, but the whole time I kind of felt that she was kind of this annoying thorn in the side that just felt because she's a super that she is telling all of the humans, you guys are doing this wrong. We need to do it like this. Like she's always like calling people out, or she was like always mean and angry. Whereas A-Train being with the Seven was this guy that it's like, man, he knows what he's doing is wrong, but he's trying to go at it as proper and nice as possible, which is interesting. Two different characters, two different sides, but almost acting different.
I mean, you could argue that A-Train did more to help the boys last season than Starlight did. Between getting Mother's Milk to the hospital and stealing the V for Huey. I mean, like he was constantly operating behind the scenes, helping them until it became clear that he wouldn't be able to do so without repercussion.
I will ask though that for the Newman character, I felt that unless I missed something, there's times where she could have just popped some heads along the way and just didn't. Like it almost seemed like was there a reason why she was holding back when she could have made sure things were done her way?
I think a lot of that is down to, her keeping her superpowers a secret. And it was like, yeah, she could pop Homelander's head at any point, but like, then her secret would be out and her career's over.
But how would her secret be out? And then how would anyone know if she like did it? I like that could be one of those things like with the smartest girl in the world. Like you have this power that's really hard to write for. Unless,
I was going to say, I have a theory about that, is that she's the establishment. She's the system. She trusts in the system itself. She's going to do this through the system. And even at the end, she was like, I still am trying to figure out how to play both sides almost to the very end until she had to like confide in Huey and be like, all right, I can't do this anymore. We need to figure something out. And even when they were working with Huey, it felt like it was still going to be behind the walls, something shady happening. And I think that's a great representation of them trying to work within the system, right? And then all of a sudden we get what's his name come in with superpowers, Venom
Butcher.
style.
Yeah.
Butcher, thank you. I forgot his name for a second. And saying pretty much F the system. That's what it feels like to me, right? At that point where it's just like, we've tried everything. This is it.
Yeah, and more to your point, even with Newman, like there's parts that I wasn't expecting. Like even her daughter's like the scary super, but she wanted to protect her daughter, and maybe more than just protect her from other supers, but protect her from herself. So by being part of the system and maybe getting something to work for both sides, that would be a better future for her daughter. So yeah.
And can we talk about the more monstrous transformations of like the recent V doses? So like for instance, Newman's daughter, being recently injected, and she has like kind of terrifying powers. Butcher himself has kind of scary,
crafty and like
some cosmic horror things going on. And then even at the very end, Ashley with her transformation.
I'm curious about that. Does something like that happen in the comics with that character? Is she in the comics?
No. So spoiler for the comics, they essentially blame everything on her, and all the superheroes get away. She's the only patsy.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Well, I like what they're doing with this. I thought it was pretty cool seeing her inject herself. Because again, this season, what it did was it made characters go through multiple arcs. Like you thought of them one way, but then they would do things you'd hate them. But then they do things that's like, wait a minute, that's pretty good of that character. Like
my wife and I have a soft spot for Chase Crawford as the Deep. I mean,
yeah, he's one of those characters. He's like an A train. He's stuck somewhere he probably doesn't really want to be, but this is all he knows.
And he's such a terrible guy, but like you can't help but
like when he wasn't gonna kill that guy, when he's like, "Well, tell me how much you like me," and then he just punches.
He's also another person that's been in every single episode, and I like that after like episode 2 of the first season, he literally kind of doesn't matter, but he's still just around,
Yeah.
He always has these arcs. He's it's almost like the comic relief.
Right.
He's the most memeable character outside of Homelander himself.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
I think, did you post this meme, Kyle? The one where it was like, oh no, actually the Deep was foreshadowing, because after Homelander punches A-Train and leaves him on the ground, Chase Crawford is like, and then
no, that wasn't me.
Later, they're like, oh yeah, Deep, blow A-Train. It's like, oh, that was a premonition.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I wonder I feel like he's not going to be redeemed. Do you think he's going to be redeemed?
No, not a chance.
Oh, the Deep?
The Deep, yeah.
I don't know. Something in me just likes it when characters can be redeemed if it feels like they're only bad because that's what life handed to them. Like, I feel like Deep, again, any superhero really. But then you see Starlight get out. So if they really wanted to, they could.
Well, but see, I think what Deep represents is he's that type of character that he's got that sunk cost fallacy where he's in too deep, pun intended, where it's like, you look at like the new Noir and he's pulling him into it and saying like, oh no, you got to understand, like murdering people can get so fun. Like, I know it's off-putting at first, but like,
right,
bro.
Yeah, that stuff was good.
And so there's that, I don't know what you would call it in human nature where, when you're a part of a group, even if you know that it's not right, there's like that commiseration of like, well, obviously the term commiseration comes from sharing in misery. And so it's like, misery loves company. You want to bring other people down with you. And I think that is the type of character that Deep is. He already kind of had a redemption arc like season 2, but you can tell that everything with him is surface level, which is, again, pun intended. He's not a very deep character. Like his redemption was just like a PR stunt.
Yeah, and that went away, and then he's back to normal.
Yeah,
I totally forgot about that he went through all that.
Yeah,
I know he tried to run away with his dolphin lover. And
yeah.
Justice for the Octopus, played by Tilda Swinton this season.
Dude,
yeah, that was crazy.
Phenomenal. My wife and I were like, wait a second, I know that voice. Ambrosius.
Good stuff. So overall, I think we're all more or less positive about this. I felt the same way about season 4 that I did about season 2, and that it was like kind of lacking at the beginning, and then it just kind of slowly just built its way back up to being pretty good, pretty good by the end. So
And there's
that's
something to be said about like Eric Kripke's stamina as a showrunner, because obviously, he did Supernatural for 15 seasons.
right.
He knows a thing or two about keeping even a storyline that can go stale. Like I don't know how much Supernatural you guys have watched.
Not much.
I've watched the whole thing, and like there were a couple seasons that kind of dropped off because it's like, man, what do you do after they've already fought Lucifer? Oh,
Yeah,
well,
that
now they have to fight God. And it's like, okay, well, now they've fought
Right.
God. And
yeah, that's cool. That is.
Cool. But overall fandom, I feel more or less is still positive overall. We had a lot of people realizing that they make fun of Republicans, which is always hilarious to me, even though they make fun of everything.
Yeah.
We had that revelation this season. We had the kind of sexual assault thing we already touched on, and there's a lot of people that are turned off on it, but overall I feel like generally people are still positive. Would you say that's true?
Yeah, I stay off socials a lot especially the boys. I'm not like, because I don't know too much about it, but I haven't heard anyone say anything bad about it.
Mm.
yeah, and people tend to politicize everything for whatever reason. I mean, it goes back to like confirmation bias. And I will say that, like, The Boys does poke fun at both sides fairly, I would say, equal in terms of quantity, but I
Mm.
would say probably quality wise, and maybe quality is not the right term, but in a qualitative sense, the shots that they take at the right tend to be um, a little bit greater than the shots that they take on the left. And I'm not saying
Mm.
that that's necessarily a bad thing, but I'm saying that that's where that perception of like, oh, they're going after the right kind of comes from. And I think that other shows that do something similar, like for instance, South Park, take shots at everyone. But I will say
Mhm.
that South Park tends to take more shots, more qualitative shots at the left than they do at the right. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, and I could even say, especially
Yeah.
nowadays, there's
Uh-oh.
the pendulum swing has been
Yeah.
enough to where in this season of The Boys, they are on stage talking about, it's like a Marvel thing, but then they're talking about inclusivity. Like that's
Yeah.
their, and I know what you're saying, that's like their
Phase
dig.
19, like
Yeah.
now, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because that kind of goes to what I'm saying is like,
Yeah.
especially in the last episode when they had the whole like, deep doing the black and white, we take responsibility for racism.
Yeah.
These are things that like the left gets made fun of, because of like entertainment stuff. But then, when it comes to the way that they critique the right, it's like very pointedly political, as opposed to making fun of like, I don't know, James Woods or something. You know what I mean?
It's almost like it's highlighting how people are picking them apart online. Like,
Yeah, that's actually a good
as
way
if
of
the people on the right, like, oh, they're just all bad and don't care about anyone. Whereas on the left, it's like they're almost virtue signaling every second with no genuine meat to it. And they
Yeah.
really show that off in this. It's done really well.
Sure. Yeah. Um, yeah. Speaking of virtue signaling, let's look at The Acolyte and compare that. Man, people hate that show. I just saw the Nelson numbers for the week, which I'm so glad Nelson is starting to do streaming stuff, so we don't have to rely on
Oh, yeah.
the lies of like Netflix and them. Um, Acolyte did not make the top 10 for this month, I believe.
And where was The Boys?
The Boys was number 2 or 3, I forget.
Wow. Very cool.
Yeah, number 1 was Bridgerton.
Oh,
naturally. No, I mean that's
well, yeah. When it comes to The Acolyte, I think the main issue, and people can say it has to do with woke stuff. I don't think. I think it's really just the story they were telling from episode to episode. It's like they were purposely making a mystery of something that can't really be a mystery, because we know what it's going to be Sith. It's somewhat so. What they do is they try to set it up. We're like, oh, what really happens? And then so by the third episode, you just get a flashback episode. And then by episode 7, you get another flashback episode. And so what happens is by the time you get midway through the show, you're like, they're just like throwing things around and nothing's really cohesive. And yeah, sure, it kind of resolves, but it doesn't. And I'll be real quick about the main issue.
no.
They try to make the Jedi bad, at fault here. but they went about it the wrong way. What they did was they made it seem like the universe was so small. Here's a couple of Jedi on this planet that fucked everything up, when really it would be institutional. It would be a top level group of Jedi that then Indara or whoever calls them, says, hey, we have these witches and these kids on this planet. The better story would be the high level Jedi people go and destroy the planet, kill the people there.
Well, and they did such a good job of that with Ahsoka, with like, you know, the high level bureaucrats in Ahsoka, you know, dismissing Hera's issues with like, oh no, we've got Imperial remnants that we need to deal with, and they're like, no, don't you realize like we have Imperial remnants everywhere because, you know, we need to keep the economy running.
Yeah, that's a good example, because there wasn't like a conspiracy. All it showed was that
bureaucracy.
it almost showed that Jedi were never anything, because the people we meet, like if we look at the reasoning for anything to happen here, for this to be the mystery, why was this a hidden mystery? Well, it was a witch got into someone's head and then made him do something crazy, go back to the place and stir up everything. So it's like, to make me feel sympathy for any of the Jedi, it's like, no, these are just dumb people. But then if that is what changes the fate of the galaxy in Star Wars, this was so, and I don't mean to be mean, but the writing was just so basic. It was really like, hey, we can hire this kid really cheap to kind of write a Star Wars story. And
well, and dude, like I would say that emblematic of the entire series, and I've been saying this since the show came out, is like it really does feel like, you know, they really just wanted to have like cool moments, and it was like, let's facilitate this moment, you know, characters be damned, plot be damned, like we don't care about the loopholes, we just want to have this cool moment that we shoot. And emblematic of that is the bleeding of the lightsaber crystal.
Yep, that's a good example.
Which, you know, I think that obviously as a visual, it was so cool seeing a blue lightsaber turn red.
Yeah.
There's no denying that. But the lore implications behind it, and the fact that they used a trope that has already been, you know, established in the universe as like, no, this is a process that you have to do to get the and like, by the way, why wouldn't Anakin's lightsaber have turned red after he murdered children? Like, you know, there's so many loopholes within creating that moment. You could have dismissed it as like, what if, you know, like you said, it's a mystery, right? You've got these twin sisters, one of them commits a murder. It's like, you could have had the lightsaber be cloaked. Like maybe she was a Sith the whole time and she was cloaking the lightsaber blue to trick people. And that could be the reason that it turns red. And you still get the visual, you still get the pop, like the moment that you want, but without disregarding, you know, everything else that has come before it.
Yeah, you're right. It's like it took moments that we know from Star Wars and tried to make it like, look, this is a thing. But it was like, no, like showing Plagueis. I love Plagueis. That book is one of the greatest books I've ever read. They just showed him. I haven't read many books, guys. But they just showed him.
I was just like, man, I've never read those books. So,
but it's like, if you're just showing and there's no context, story, lore, substance, it's proving once again that they're, like you said, they're just, here's the cool Star Wars bullet points we want in the show, and then we'll cobble together some like story to make it all connect. That, I think, is what everyone's issue is. It's just hard to articulate that because the production value is so good.
Yep. And so, yeah, a lot of the, you know, online discourse becomes about like woke stuff or like, oh, you know, diversity hires this or, you know, that kind of stuff. And like really what it comes down to is it's just, you know, it's just blah writing. And maybe that's the curse of writing for a franchise, is that even as fans of the franchise, you know, you would be hard pressed to find a diehard Star Wars fan that could write a good, compelling Star Wars story and not try to stuff it full of things that they like. You know what I mean?
Hold my beer. No, I'm just. I've got so many ideas. I just need to make videos of them.
There you go. You know, I hear that can be a very lucrative YouTube career. Some people
apparently. Yeah. I will add one more thing because I know I'm talking about this so much. Like Kyle hasn't even said anything, but I think that the lightsaber fight, I forget it was episode 4 or 5 with the Jedi and Chimera, in my opinion, is the best choreographed Star Wars lightsaber fight scene I've seen live action. It's just, it's hidden under this really mediocre show. Yeah, I think so. Even though I love that, like this was a step above, like in terms of because sometimes a choreograph scene is too telegraphed that oh, I'm doing. And
They're
this, the
dance
way
fighting.
they were doing fights, like I was like, holy shit, this is fast and crazy. I don't even know what's going on. I liked it for that. So
Okay.
One thing I
what are your
noted is, oh, go ahead. One thing I noted was that I see a lot of similarities to this and that other failed Marvel project, Secret Wars. And that project was, if you look at the comic, it's like supposed to be this huge intrigue about who is who could be a Skrull, right? Shapeshifters could be anyone. And in Secret Wars, they just tell you who everyone is in the first episode. It's like
interesting.
any intrigue out the window.
I
Like,
never
in the
watched
first
that,
20 minutes.
but
which, by the way, related to that, a show that did that really well was the 2004 Battlestar Galactica, which is available to watch on Amazon Prime for free right now.
Yes.
So,
and I've been watching it. That is a good show. I need to
Yes.
get back into it. Oh yeah.
Me too. I haven't. It's been a while. But yeah, I do remember there was like a paranoia to it all at a certain point when you don't know who's a Cylon and who isn't.
Whoa,
Yeah.
what if they gave those people a Star Wars project?
yeah, Ronald Moore.
Yeah, I don't know the creators, but that they get it.
They certainly do.
Because they could have
Yeah.
used a AAA budget, as opposed to like the Sci-Fi Channel.
Yeah.
Is it that you mentioned a second ago that like when you have so many fans of something and people want something out of it, they're going to put their own thing into it. So we have this thing that is Star Wars that is probably way too big now, right? So everyone has an opinion about what it should be. Is Star Wars just Walmart? Has it become the Walmart? And like that's the problem. Like, sure, Walmart has great deals. You can get good stuff, but it's Walmart. Do you really want to go to Walmart? And are we at that point with Star Wars where it's like you can make something great, but it's still gonna be Walmart at this point?
Yeah.
You could make that argument about like, Marvel and DC too.
Sure.
And
Hey, cool, quick,
everything
though.
ends up having a kind of a cloud cast over it, because it's always going to be compared to something that maybe it doesn't even necessarily deserve to be compared to.
Mhm.
Everyone's going to compare Star Wars movies, whether they are tied to the Skywalker saga or not. They're going to be compared to the original trilogy, and I don't think that that's a fair comparison. Sometimes something can exist in a universe without being connected to the work that created said universe. Is that
Yeah, and you know what's interesting because I think a lot of what we're seeing is where it's again at the top, the production, the executives, maybe kind of like Rogue One was really good, but I heard they had to do reshoots and stuff, and someone came, but like I still think that was a good movie, but I noticed issues, especially with the characters, and so how much was the middling that changed that? But and then also with like DC films, like it's that thing like you should trust. You need to trust the people that's created, trust the source. Yeah, you might need to come in and be like, don't do this, but there's too much of this, I think, hands-on approach that we see in these big deal, and that's what makes the Walmart stuff, because it's like, how can we do this cheap, but it hits the mark? Some lightsaber battles, Force stuff. We'll push that out there.
Yeah. Well, and I guess, to your point, Kyle, like, when you're trying to please a wider audience, you've cultivated this audience where it's like, okay, we've taken this thing that was popular with a niche community, and then we've mass market appealed it to where now like every common denominator enjoys it. But at that point, does it become so diluted and so vanilla that like it's not interesting anymore?
Right.
Then every time you try to appeal to the mass fan base, you're never going to please everyone. So like,
You know what? I wonder if the problem is like Marvel did so many movies so well for so long, but they were pulling from source material. Star Wars had source material, but Disney didn't want to pull from it for the sequels. I mean, George Lucas had already written it, and all that legacy stuff that already existed. It's like they might as well have made a Thrawn story based on the Thrawn trilogy instead of, okay, we'll add him in the Clone Wars, but we'll change. Like, I think that's the main issue if we are to compare it. There is source material. Disney just doesn't use it. So then they make stuff up that's just like falls flat. And again, we can compare to Gundam. They continue to make good stories. Uh,
Well,
so
and what's ironic is that they stopped using source material for Marvel projects too. Like to your point, like Secret Invasion,
Yes.
one of the really powerful moments in Secret Invasion in the comic books is everyone's like, "Oh, Iron Man was this bad guy during Civil War. Like he was trying to put all of the, superhumans in internment camps and things like that." And it was like, "Okay, so he must have been a Skrull this whole time. He must have been like a pretender that wasn't really Iron Man." And then he's like, "No, that was all me." Like, and it was this just gut-wrenching moment where everyone realizes, "Oh, no, he was like, that was Tony. He did this." And it was like, yeah, because he had an experience. So even and maybe that's something that we need to have, like, Hollywood take example from is, in the comic book world, you have these huge creative teams, right? Like, you have different people working on different books. Sometimes it's a writer and an artist, and you're having like consultants on individual books, and yet somehow they're able to, you know, craft these stories that are interwoven with one another and are compelling to, a diverse audience. Why is it that that can't be replicated in television and movies?
yeah, and it's like it
Mhm.
can. You just need the people. You just need people that understand what made something resonate with people in the first place, and I think that's missed a lot. Um, but sometimes, like I would take Blade for example. I think the difference was you had a very charismatic lead that put physicality into it, and so a lot of times if I don't have any like Mahershala Ali, that didn't really take off that version of Blade. Why? Well, it probably wasn't a necessary story while they're already trying to scramble and make these other things because there was nothing more. There's no more substance than the actor to the story. Wesley Snipes was a martial artist. There's more to Blade because of that. And yeah, so I think if you're not adapting it, understanding what the source is supposed to say, you at least need to go in where there's like this this effort on more than just one angle, more than just the acting, to really make something intriguing. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, we just had this weekend. Twister made $80 million. Another
Oh,
movie that did great, and it's about middle of America chasing storms.
and
Hollywood didn't think anything of it, and it's the biggest movie of the week.
yeah, and
So
I saw it, and it was a fine movie, just super basic and boring. But
mhm,
maybe that's what people wanted: a safe,
could be.
good-looking actors movie with tornadoes, disaster. You know,
Yeah. I mean, the
Yeah.
original one was great too, but I
yeah,
think that was more character driven. You had Bill Paxton, you had
Mhm.
Helen Hunt, uh, Philip Seymour Hoffman was in that movie. It was like
yeah.
it was a star-studded cast. Carrie Elwes. I mean, it had so many Hollywood heavyweights, and this new
Mhm.
one has what Glenn Powell is like. That's the
That's the main one. Other than David Cornsweet, the new Superman, he has a little
Oh, he's in
side.
there.
He has
Nice.
there
some,
you go.
and he does a good job. Like his purpose is done with a few lines throughout the film. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
Cool.
Um, but
Yeah,
this
but it
Friday.
seems like no one knows what anyone wants anymore, and that's a problem. And I think we're gonna see a return to like less $200 million movies, more like 30 to $40 million movies. They're not going to be huge blockbuster events. They'll make their money back.
The next
They'll
Jurassic
do the
Park.
job. Yeah,
Gareth Edwards under 100, from what I heard. Scarlett
really.
Johansson, Mahershala Ali is going to be in it now. So you get these good actors. Gareth Edwards under 100. I hope that's a new trend with these movies.
So do you think it's worth trying to like diagnose that problem? Like, is it a social media thing where executives don't know exactly what people want because there's like information overload? Do you think that like there's just too many voices and
Too
um
many executives trying to put in their piece with the vision lost.
well, and it makes me wonder, like, do we need to, and this might parlay into a another topic that I think we have on the docket today, is like, do we need to move from the traditional Hollywood, producer funded model to more of a crowdfunding model where it's like people that are interested in the vision of a director or a filmmaker that, put money up front, then you know at least that people are going to be committed. Because I think a lot of what's going on is you get this social media like lukewarm reception where it's like, yeah, I could go see a Star Wars movie, and then they blow $380 million on it, and then it's like, oh yeah, no, I just said something on Twitter, that was a throwaway line. Part of what I think makes a lot of like Kickstarter campaigns so successful is that people are bought in from the inception of the idea.
Yeah.
And maybe that's what needs to start happening, is like, instead of taking a chance on these super expensive summer blockbusters, see if there's an audience for that blockbuster before you produce the thing.
Yeah, and how much though? And I don't know if this is a part of this, but these inflated budgets, is it just producers paying themselves?
No, it's if you notice, there's been we call them reshoots, right? Films, whenever you like, you need a insert, you need a close up. You forgot to get a close up of a reaction or something, so you do a day or two, maybe a week of reshoots for a film.
And it could be a producer being like, I want to put this in let's do reshoots so we can have that could probably be part of it.
The reason that they're big, we're getting $200 million, is that we're not doing reshoots anymore. An executive is changing their mind halfway after things have been filmed, after millions of dollars have been spent, and going, let's do it again. We're calling them reshoots. They're making the film twice. Let's be real.
Yeah. I mean, if you look at like the changes that were made to the Justice League, those were plot changes. It wasn't just like, oh, we're tweaking a couple of things and making sure that we can Photoshop out Superman's mustache. It's like, no, they revised the ending of that movie,
and they only used some shots from Zack Snyder. Like, I watched this comparison not too long ago.
That still blows my mind, some of those inserts.
And you know what, I found this 4-year-old video, or maybe 2-year-old video, that was Zack Snyder watching Batman vs Superman with his notes and storyboards and noting as he was going along. And I think that's the greatest treasure ever from a director to give to people. And it's like, I feel like Zack Snyder's the type where in the future we're going to look back and be like,
perhaps we judged you too harshly.
Yeah. But I do think that there was the wrong kind of studio meddling with him, where I think he needs guidance. But if it's the type of guidance that's more about what could we do to make more money,
Yeah, I don't have a problem with Zack Snyder. I just don't think he should have written a movie with Colin Trevorrow, the dude who wrote Jurassic World. No one wants that. Get a good writer. When he worked,
what did he write with Colin Trevorrow?
Justice League. He wrote that. Colin Trevorrow wrote Justice League.
I didn't know that because I liked Zack Snyder's Justice League.
Yeah.
I had no idea Colin Trevorrow.
Did he write?
No, are you talking about Chris? The other guy. Oh no, that might have been Batman vs Superman. Chris Terrio.
Yeah, Chris Terrio's
Batman vs Superman. Yeah.
Yes, I believe so. But yeah, I mean, when he worked with 300, that was great. When he works with other people, Robert Rodriguez. Oh wait, that was the other dude. Never mind. But when he works with someone like 300, I think it works really well. He just shouldn't write things. He's not a good writer.
Well, we've talked about that too. Like, I don't want to say the auteur myth, because a lot of things, I think, I don't think that Star Wars would have happened without George Lucas. And I think that it's disrespectful to say like, oh, well, they were saved in the edits and like his wife did all the work. And it's like, no, I mean, it was a group effort. And I think that when he is working within the constraints of what other people are telling him to do, he definitely works better. Just like Kojima, just like Tomino. But yeah, I think I would agree with that for Zack Snyder as well. As it's like he's capable of doing really great work, but maybe not when he's given complete creative control. Would you say that that's fair?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's for anyone, even me, even if I think I know what's best. But just to correct, because I've been fascinated by Zack Snyder lately. Colin Trevorrow didn't write. It was Chris Terrio that did.
It was Chris Terrio. Okay, I get those two confused. They're
because
the same person.
I thought Chris Terrio was pretty good, although I can't really name other things of his that I've watched or seen or anything. But yeah, I think it really goes to that point where it can't just be one person.
Yeah.
And I think the original trilogy proves that, because by the third movie, Gary or whatever wasn't producing anymore. And so it was the first time that it wasn't produced by the person who did Star Wars and Empire. Gary Kurtz.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, and by that time, then George Lucas was pretty much directing Return of the Jedi, even though they had Richard Marquand, and then, yeah, even the prequels, George Lucas didn't want to direct them, but no one would take it.
Yeah.
I still think just all of Star Wars is an accident.
The what of Star Wars?
It's just a big accident. It was dumb luck, and we're still riding that high 50 years later.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that there's probably something to that Mel Brooks line from Spaceballs where it's like merchandising is where the money's at. Would Star Wars have been the commercial success that it was without lightsaber toys? Probably not. Every kid wanted a laser sword is really what it came down to.
Yeah, and I was reading that during the production of Batman Forever, the toy companies came to help design the Batmobile and the gadgets.
Mm-hmm.
That's already then. Oh, and then that actually happened in The Last Jedi when they were designing Kylo Ren's TIE fighter. The company showed what they added, like missiles that can pop up and shoot, and so they added that into the movie, like because Rian Johnson liked the idea. It's like stuff like that's like really,
yeah. But so I guess to get back to the root of the issue is we're talking about these bloated budgets, and this is a problem that doesn't just affect Hollywood or streaming services. It affects video games too. Like really, everybody's going way over budget, and I don't think anyone really has a hold on where that money's going. Like, is there like some weird money laundering operation going on? Like,
it feels like
someone going to Cancun that we.
The reshoot thing sounded plausible, but I also think, especially if you think about video games, it's not like they have to do reshoots.
Yeah,
but all
there's
the money
a ton of crunch at the end of every video. Like it's crazy to me that the video game culture. It's like, okay, we know for a fact that the last 8 months of production are going to be miserable and everyone's going to be overworked, and it's like it seems like that shouldn't be the case when I don't know. You look at some of the budgets that previous movies have made, and I brought this up on Discord a couple of weeks ago. Is it's like you look at Jurassic Park, which I think had the original one from the 90s had a production crew of like less than 3,000 people total, and I think that the total budget was somewhere around like 129 million. I may be getting that number. No, it was 33 million, something like that. Because if you look at Avengers Endgame, their budget was like 300 some odd million, but like if you were to take the Jurassic Park budget and adjust it for inflation, it's still only like 129 million. So it's like,
wow.
So even if you made the 1990s Jurassic Park today, it would cost like a third of what it cost to make Avengers Endgame. And then add to that the staff that was required to make that movie was almost double, if not triple. It's like, what are all these people doing? If all of this money is going into it, everyone's getting paid, would you say that the visual effects in Avengers Endgame were really that much better than Jurassic Park?
No.
Yeah. And we've even heard that they kind of cheap out on special effects.
If not worse, yeah.
So, I wonder if is it just people are lazy? Like we're hiring a bunch of dead weight to just sit around and collect a check?
Well, I'll tell you this. Art doesn't pay, right? So a good example, I'll give you a good example, both Star Wars, Tunisia, the moisture farm, and The Room in Sa. These were George Lucas, how do you want this moisture farm? I don't know. Just put some stuff up, whatever. Same with the Saw. It's just a cheap room. Let's just splatter some blood. A couple people here. I'm not getting paid on this, so I'm working 24 hours. You have all of my time. All right, that was the first Saw.
Yeah,
I think it was either the second or the third Saw. They had to recreate that room. That they just threw together with like hundreds of bucks. Now recreating that room cost millions. and millions of dollars to make it exactly the same way. And now these people that are working on the film have a salary. They have now a supervisor who is also getting paid. And the same thing that an artist did, for their time and no money, people that want a working salary are making it for 1,000, 2,000, 4,000 times percent higher than it was. It's kind of crazy. And I bring up Star Wars because the Tunisia moisture farms, the same thing. It was just they threw it together, and then in the prequels, they had to really work to make
recreate things. Yeah. It goes back indie filmmaking, indie game development. They can achieve so much more than these bigger productions do. Very interesting.
Yeah, but I mean, see, even like, I wouldn't even say just indie stuff. I mean, like, I would say even the production in the 90s that was like franchised. So like, GoldenEye, if you've ever watched like some of the production for that Rare did for the GoldenEye game on N64 was crazy. Like, is this bootstrap team. Most of them had never made video games in the first place. They had the woman that was doing like the 3D models for the guns basically just had to like operate off of some pictures that they took at like the museum. Like it was,
and they had like barn houses that they were filling with computers and desks just to get space for people to work.
Yeah, it's wild. I mean, I don't know. Do you think that do you think that we're just like too cushy now? We all love our little MacBooks and we have to have our lattes while we, code a video game? Like,
yeah. It's kind of like what I was talking about on the Blue Gamer podcast from playing that RTS. And it's like it had to have all the features AI would have, but then it just makes the game boring. When it had lacked the AI features, it made it a little more interesting because the developer didn't have that possibility in their tool belt.
Yeah.
The limits.
It's interesting. Yeah. So would it be that maybe art, or not even art, let's just say a production, functions better in a kind of this free reign approach of making something like an artist where they can make decisions on the moment? Or do we want people paid? Like, that's the thing. I'm trying to figure out a good way to word this, because the idea I'm getting at is it seems like art comes from a place of passion, whereas a lot of our IP driven stuff is definitely over productized, over commercialized, and it doesn't seem like that we get that same passion because of it,
Yeah, we don't live in like a time where, it's like we don't have a Medici family that's going to be cutting checks to people to do whatever they want. And even then, I would say what's funny is people kind of reference that like, oh, artists used to have patrons and things like this. And I'm like, yeah, but they also had a say in what that artist would do, Like I think that if Michelangelo was left to his own devices, he wasn't going to paint the ceiling of a church. But where can we strike that balance where artists can be compensated for their work because they deserve to be? Like that's, but we don't compromise the vision in order to make it profitable on the back end. Is that kind of what we're getting at?
Yes.
I think what we're seeing with both Warner Brothers and Sony is the two CEO approach for projects. And I think that's the way moving forward. It's the business side and the creative side, so they can make sure you could focus creatively, focus financially to make it work out. So seeing that Sony and Warner are both doing this, I think that is the path.
I mean, that was Disney for the most part. Disney ran the creative side and his brother ran the business.
Oh, in the early days? That's how it worked.
Until they both died,
that. Yeah. Wow. Fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Huh.
Yeah. Didn't die too long ago, like 15 years ago.
Wow.
Something like that. Yeah, he was definitely alive while we were alive.
Wow. So that, I think, then maybe speaks to this idea even more. Yeah, it's about the collaboration at the end of the day. Having people that have a specific skill set that complement each other.
Yeah. I mean, shoot, even Stan Lee had, Jack Kirby and Steve Ditko like holding his hand throughout everything that he did. So it's like, and again, like I said, I don't want to take credit away from these like, great creators of previous generations, but yeah, I think that there is a definite art is collaborative. I think in its nature,
Yeah.
kind of has to be.
Yeah. What inspires you to make something came from somewhere.
Yeah. I'm wondering too. I want to go back to like the overbloatedness before we wrap this up. Just had a thought.
Yeah.
Is it because it's IP driven, right? Say we have a bunch of movies. It's the 80s. We have a bunch of movies, and a producer. We talked about, is a producer necessary, or is it making the right decisions? I think at a certain point, a producer would go to an actor and say, do this, you get this amount, right? And they would either counter or they would accept. And at a certain point, there would be a pushback from the producer to say, like, no, you're not getting that. And we're going with someone else now. When we have IP driven content, where you're trying to create this vision of a world, I feel like the actor has more power in that situation. So they make a movie. Robert Downey Jr. gets paid what, like a couple million, 100,000, I forget. An Iron Man 1, and then Iron Man 2. Oh, you want to make another movie, but you made it with me.
Now I
have the power now.
Yeah.
Let's bring that up to 10 million. And then, we get to Spider-Man Homecoming, where Robert Downey Jr. got like 50 million just for like a few seconds of appearance.
Wow.
Yeah.
I feel like studios are losing their power in this situation when you have this huge IP driven thing and you make Secret Wars with $200,000 and it stars Samuel L. Jackson. And I love Samuel L. Jackson, but he's not a $200 million star.
No. And you know what? I think that it's not even necessarily coming from the actors themselves, because I think, knowing Samuel L. Jackson's personality, knowing Robert Downey Jr.'s personality, these are people that would, if you said like, hey, this is for the good of the franchise, like we're going to pay you what we can, I think that they would probably say yes. But once you have third interested parties, the agents, the assistants, there's all these other people that want to get paid. And so it's not necessarily that Robert Downey Jr. gets $50 million. It's that Robert Downey Jr. is probably getting $30 million, and then he's got to break off $1 million to this agent, $1 million to this negotiator, $2 million to the lawyer that negotiates the contract. All of a sudden, what would be a $10-30 million actor becomes a $50 million actor because of all of the people that are trying to get their piece of the pie. And
good point.
Yeah, I think that's where a lot of your bloat is coming from, whether it's union reps for all of the different, because you have like actors unions, but then you also have like set unions and things like that for people that are just, gaffers and like, grips and stuff like that.
Like guaranteed pay.
Yeah.
So that's interesting. Both Kyle, you talking about the reshoots, and Steven, the kind of bloated, the deals that are made to get, that helps me kind of wrap my head around those inflated budgets.
And the cocaine.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, don't forget about that. Yeah, it's getting out of hand. It's crazy. Like there's no way there's no extortion happening to a certain extent.
Yeah.
At that budget. There's just no way.
Yeah, it's not sustainable. And I feel bad for like the team of probably like 8 core VFX people that are, slaving away for the last 8 months after reshoots, that it's like, the entire production is on the backs of like 9 people because of the actions of like thousands of others, it's crazy.
Yeah, that's why I try to work small. Keep it small. If you need an HR team, I think you're too big. That's my theory. That's how I work for the most part. Yeah, I think we need to go back to smaller projects, stuff like that. And I thought that's what we would get out of YouTube, if you asked me like 10 years ago. But I think there's this middle ground somewhere with streaming services that isn't YouTube, but isn't Hollywood, that we could play around with a good, modest 10 to 20 million budget and make something good. I think that's a possibility, but it's hard when you have 2 movies that are like $1 billion. There's your whole year's budget, right? Almost.
For sure.
So yeah, it's just convincing, or not even convincing. It might just be the audience. Who knows? But yeah, just the people waiting for the people to either accept it or the studios to catch on and realize, yeah, smaller budgets, they could work. They could
And do you think
definitely make
do
something
you think that
happen.
there is, like, any when it comes to these, like, IP franchise-based, productions, whether it's on streaming services or, at the box office, do you think that there is any unity to be found among, the geek culture that's consuming these products? Or do you think that it's always gonna be this side's pissed off and this side's happy or vice versa?
Yeah,
I
especially if you look at social media, there'll always be someone pissed off. That's the problem.
Yeah, I don't think I think the divisiveness will go down. Like right now, it seems split right down the middle. Like, and it is just split. I feel like it'll go down. There'll always be divisiveness, like you said, but not this bad. I feel like there has to be some unity in some sort. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's Twisters 3. Who knows? Maybe that'll bring us all together.
Yeah.
Maybe another Barbenheimer or something like that.
Oh yeah.
Um, I don't know, but
Deadpool versus Wolverine,
could be Deadpool.
Wolverine. I guess
Could be
it's not a
Deadpool.
verse.
Yeah,
I'm curious about that. I'm not into the super goofy nature of it, but hopefully there's enough substance under that.
yeah, I hope so. We'll see. We'll have to wait till next week.
Actually, this week.
Yeah,
Friday.
But yeah, any final thoughts, notes, news that you want to bring up before we get on out of here?
No, all good here. This is a
Yeah,
good
no, I think
discussion.
we touched on everything. It's interesting to me that, like, both Acolyte and The Boys ended their seasons this week, and then
Right.
just in time for the final season of Cobra Kai to kick off. So,
Oh,
so if you're tired and it's like, hey, I just finished The Boys, what am I going to do now? Well, you've got Cobra Kai over on Netflix.
I tapped out around season 3. I'll probably finish once everything's wrap up. I'll probably go back and binge it again, check it out. I did like those first couple seasons, but it did kind of fall off for me personally.
Yeah.
But that'll do it for us this week, folks. Be sure to like and subscribe our videos, and if you're watching on a podcast app, hey, thanks for downloading. No one uses RSS feeds these days, so you're probably the only one. Congrats. Good for you. Be sure to like us on Free Speech Geek, FSG Media Group on Twitter and Instagram, freespeechgeek.com. Guys, Steven, tell us where we could find you.
Yeah, Midnight Hatter across the web. You're sure to find me.
Nice. Adam.
Yeah, adamblue.com, probably the best place. You can see my Gundam stuff, my Blue Gamer stuff. Yeah.
Nice. Awesome. Yeah, and for me, be sure to check out Simply New Type. We got some Char's Counterattack videos as well as Bertachika's Children videos coming out this month, so it should be fun. But that'll do it for this week, guys. Catch you next week. Oh, next week is Comic-Con. I'm not going, but I'm going to be talking a lot about it, so
sweet.
paying attention to that.
I can't wait
yeah.
to come back with.
Yeah, it should be fun. But yeah, we'll catch you next week. See ya.
All right,
Cheers, guys.